Right, everyone, welcome back. It's been a while.
Oh yeah.
Welcome to this week's podcast. And if you can't tell, Al is looking well and rested,
Yeah.
not by
I
choice.
yeah, two weeks of one week of voluntary PTO and one week of involuntary COVID PTO, but I slept a lot and drank a lot of water, so my skin I think is glowing a little bit more from all the hydration and rest.
And then looking more relaxed,
That's right. That's right.
Anyways, welcome to this week's podcast. And if you guys are new to the podcast, welcome. Each week, while Al and I tackle some sort of issue or issues on cybersecurity, physical security, public safety, operational security, risk management, and we have a fun conversation about it. This week, we're playing catch up in the news, not because we've been slacking on the episodes, but the sheer volume of everything that's just been going on. So we figured we'll just take a little time just to catch up on the myriad of different things that just been happening. And gosh, each of them could probably be an episode unto itself, but you'll probably will end up be hearing more things before we can even catch up. Al, I think we have so much to talk about. Um, for living in such interesting times. So
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean it's yeah, I mean I feel like last year the news cycle was intense. Um, and literally like a year ago last year, right? We were talking about an assassination attempt on a presidential candidate, right? And if we fast forward a year later, since that time, um, the news cycle has been insane. I mean, I think we last year we were like, wow, that it can't get any crazier than that. Somebody took a shot at a presidential candidate, well, at least grazed them, right? I mean, that was the top news story um for several weeks. 2025, let's fast forward to 2025. I feel like we've had multiple big news stories that are overcome by events less than like 72 to 96 hours later. Something else. And it's just been like back to back since we started, I think, in January. I mean, and January doesn't even account for what happened in December, which was a crazy month. Historically, December is not typically as crazy. And 2024 December was absolutely bonkers. Um, and then we roll right into New Year's and we literally, and I think this is the title of our podcast from January. We literally started the year off with a bang, two bangs, in Las Vegas and in New Orleans. And now we're in July and it has been literally nonstop since January when it comes to the news cycle, the events across globally, not just here in the United States, but globally. It has been nonstop. Um, so I mean, um, yeah, it's been crazy. I mean, we could probably be live every day for the rest of the year and have a significant topic to talk about.
I mean, hey, we could always be the next Joe Rogan.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
So let me point out an obvious fact here. It is July. I don't know about you, but I was making this comment to a friend of mine the other week. I was like, where has the time gone? It just felt like just yesterday that the presidential inauguration and we were digging out of a massive snowstorm. And now we're, what, 6 months past into the year? Now we're into the seventh month. That is insane if you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely insane.
Oh, well, let's have some fun today here. Where do you want to start? Air India, or where do you want to go?
Yeah, yeah. We promised the audience that we would definitely talk about Air India. And it's unfortunate we didn't get a chance to talk about it sooner. Um, However, there was a lot of stuff happening at the time, if everyone recalls. Um, and it's also good to note on specifically air incidences. Um, there is a lot of post-event analysis that has to occur. There was a new report released, which gave us a little bit more insight as to why the plane potentially went down. So I think it's better. It's a little sometimes it's better to be a little bit um, delayed in our analysis and response, and I think that's the case here. Obviously, it was a tragic event. Unfortunately, we've seen several aviation incidences this year, and we've covered a lot of them. Um, and it always anytime an aviation event occurs, it always hits close to home for me and Josh because we travel quite a bit. We're in planes quite a bit. This one particularly, I found out a few weeks ago. So I had some extended family members who live in the UK who were actually on that flight. I didn't know any. I didn't know any of them. I didn't know any of them personally, but Ahmedabad, India is actually where my family comes from India. So that's we've got a lot of roots in that part. And so it's extended, very extended family that relocated to the UK several years ago. Apparently they were on that flight. So very sobering for me to find that out. But this unfortunately is the reality of one, coming from a very large family, and two, um, you know, the state of aviation today, unfortunately.
Yeah. So, as a quick recap, so for those of you who've somehow been living under a rock, Air India, I think it's flight 171, takes off. And then a few seconds into the flight, um, all power ceases on its flight, and then it begins a very slow descent and crashes right into a hostel housing doctors. So, very quickly, a lot of questions, a lot of speculations. What happened? This was a early manufactured Boeing 787-8, one of the, I think, first 20 or 30 manufactured. I think I forgot. I have to look at the line number. But the Boeing 787 has had a stellar reputation despite all its faults and delays and everything like that. This is the first we call hull loss. So it's the first time the plane has, literally been destroyed beyond repair and completely written off entirely. Um, and the plane has flown, I think, safely, if I remember correctly, 14 years without any major incidents other than the battery fires and everything like that. But
Yeah.
this kind has not had any incidents whatsoever in its 14 years career. So this is the first time it's ever happened. I would also like to point out that the Boeing 777 that a lot of people you might be able to see a lot, and it's the backbone of many airlines. That flew safely for 13 years, if I'm mistaken, before it actually had its first incident. So keep that in mind as part of this conversation. Boeing 787 lasted 1 year longer than its sister aircraft. Um, the incident report. So if you guys aren't familiar, the general rule of thumb is a preliminary, emphasis on the word preliminary report, is usually due, and it's usually due within 30 days of the actual crash. So it's been about 30 days since the crash of Air India Flight 171. And so it has turned out a whole host of information. So apparently there has been a couple service advisories, not bulletins, advisories. So they were just say, be on the lookout for this. Two of them relating to engines and fuel. I think one of them, I think there was a GE advisory that came out, if I'm mistaken. I could be wrong, but I remember the engine manufacturer had a slight relationship with bulletin with that. And then Boeing also issued a subsequent advisory too about fuel. You can improperly install the switches too, and you can improperly deactivate them potentially. And I bring this up only because it's been brought to everyone's attention that on the flight data recorder, 3 seconds immediately after takeoff, the fuel sources were cut off at that point. Well, fuel was necessary to drive any engine, so essentially, the engine is now turned off, which would also explain the ram air turbine being dropped almost immediately because of the loss of power. And so, yeah, you know, low altitude and everything like that, it was surprising. It surprised a lot of people, and it raises a lot of questions right now. And I'm not sure what to say or what to think, other than the fact that it raises more questions than answers in my book. And I think it also raises, questions on human factors, what can be done or what could be done. Um, I've seen some of the aviation forum community posts and everything. After hearing that, Al, I don't know about what you, but my first reaction was, I hope this wasn't pilot suicide.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, there was some flat recorder dialogue that they published, and it's tough to it, it it's tough to really, I think, get the full picture just from the flight recorder data and the logs. There's going to be probably an extensive background investigation on both pilots, and just for everyone's education. One pilot was a very senior pilot. He was actually an Air India instructor, and he was the captain of the flight. The second pilot, significantly less experienced, but still an experienced pilot, almost 3,500 flight hours, which is quite substantial. It's not a low number of flight hours at all. But I think there'll be a thorough look into the background and mentality of both these individuals leading up to the events. And this isn't uncommon in an FAA investigation. Anytime there's a crash, they always look at the staff to see what was going on. I believe I forget what specific flight. I think it was a Malaysia Air flight several years ago. They were looking at the pilot. There was some thought
Oh, MH370. The
Yes, there was some speculation that the pilot, because he was going through he'd either just gotten out of a divorce, or he was having some issues in his personal life. There was speculation that potentially um, that might have been a uh, a suicidal pilot who took the plane down. That was never substantiated, and the family actually fought against some of that speculation. But it is something that is always done as a routine part of these investigations. So that will likely in the coming weeks, we'll probably get some background there as to if that was in fact a factor. It initial logs kind of just from the chatter in the cockpit, it sounds as if um, one of the pilots hit the fuel cutoff, actuated the fuel cutoff switch. Um, Unclear as to why, and there was cockpit communication between the pilots as to like, why'd you do that? What's going on? And then they didn't really give much more details, and that's not uncommon either because it is still an ongoing investigation. But that portion of the conversation was released. I guess we could go over like reasons you would hit the fuel cutoff. I mean, the most the most obvious one to me is, one of the pilots observes one of the engines is on fire, right? Well, you've got to cut the fuel off, typically to the engine that's on fire. You would typically do, but we also have to understand that takeoff and landing are two of the most stressful times for a pilot, right? There's a lot of stuff going on at those two critical times in the flight, um, and all of a sudden something's on fire. You can panic, right? I mean, the panic is is a very real reaction when you're in a plane, you're throttling up, and all of a sudden one of the engines goes on fire. Now we don't know if we don't at this point know if anything was on fire or not, but we do know based on the flight log the fuel cutoff switch was actuated. So that is speculation there. Maybe there was a fire that was observed and they had to hit that to get the fire to cut off fuel to the fire. Um, other reasons, Josh, you're probably more well versed in that than me. That's the most obvious reason to me is that there's a fire, and you got to get that engine out.
Sometimes bird strike would do it too as well.
Yeah, yeah,
But there's no evidence of a fire there. There's no evidence of a bird strike, and I think that's part of the challenge here. It's like it takes significant amount of effort, to knock this, knock the switches out, so
yeah.
it would turn off. Now,
It
keeping
would
also,
be sorry to cut you off, but it would have been a very deliberate act. It's not like something you can just bump and all of a sudden, oh, he sneezed and hit the cutoff switch. This is a switch that requires significant effort. Like you have to deliberately move the switch to cut the fuel off to the engine.
yeah, and if you guys look online, you can see that you have to actually, to turn the switch on, you actually have to lift up, pull,
Yeah,
and then drop it in, and then lift up, drop, pull back to drop in. So it takes, effort to do that kind of movement.
right. It's a deliberate act. Again, though, don't want to speculate that it was it was suicide or anything like that. Yeah, because there are legitimate reasons to do this.
But for both,
But
that's kind of the scary thing. Like both is one thing. It like
yeah,
and it also begs the question though too. Um, a plane at a factory OEM is supposed to be doing that way, where the parts require you to physically lift it out and pull it back and then drop. It's in like a switch. You just flip it on and off like a light switch. It doesn't work like that. There's a physical mechanism you have to overcome. Otherwise, it's supposed to be locked in play. Now the
right.
question though also becomes one of like maintenance. Does it allow for you to do that, or do they swap out something they weren't supposed to? It could be any number of reasons. Why that potentially may have happened, but supposedly out of factory, you're not supposed to be able to do that. So there's a lot of questions here. And
Right.
remember, as we've previously talked about, it's not just one thing. It's always a series of small little things, insignificant on their own, but when brought together, lines up perfectly, and then boom, you have the perfect incident at that point, and then all hell breaks loose.
So yeah, and I think the questions that come out of this are, and let's kind of like just walk the dog here a little bit. If there was an engine fire, right? Again, this is all speculation. If there's an engine fire, we got to look at Air India and their maintenance and what were you guys like? What happened here? Were you guys glossing over critical maintenance cycles in order to get the plane up and get them out, right? And then we have to go back to Boeing and say, wait a second, were you aware of any potential issues with the engine that could have caused the fire on takeoff, right? And Josh mentioned this. I mean, this airframe has flown for several years without incident, or without a major incident where the entire airframe was lost, right? So I don't want to say without incident because that's not necessarily true. So those questions start being raised up. If it was a bird strike, we got to look at the airport and say, hey, what was your bird mitigation plan? Why, if you knew birds are in the area, why would you send a plane through that flight path, right? If it is a potential suicide by pilot, then we need to go back and look at, what were you burning out your pilots? Were you stressing them too much? Were they actually getting the 8 hours of rest that they're required to have? There's all these other questions that come out, like Josh mentioned, this thing leaves you with more questions than answers, unfortunately, right?
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, and in all this is when you're looking at an incident of this nature and size. There are just so many variables that, it's too easy to jump to conclusion and just simply say it's X.
Yeah.
And, I think if anything, any of these incidents or accidents or anything I've learned over the years is it's not just a issue. It is a series of complex issues, that doesn't show itself until you have that perfect, set of conditions. And, for all we know, maybe there was a defect in the switch design. Maybe there was an improper part installed. Maybe, something happened, pilot has some bad habits and he did it. Who knows? Either way, a series of perfect events happened, and now we have we had an airplane fall out of the sky, quite literally.
Yeah, literally fell out of the sky. So I think as this investigation continues to unfold, we'll get more and more information, and hopefully get some answers to some of these questions. Um, the other part of this tragedy is, for whatever reason, the pilots couldn't find a clearing or a clear field to put the plane down in, and unfortunately, it flew right into a hospital housing unit. Um, it, you know,
Well, I mean, given where it is and everything like that, I'm not entirely surprised. And
correct.
I'm not saying that it's a pilot's fault or airport designer's fault, but let's just be honest. Like in India being, I think it officially surpassed China being the most populous nation in the country.
Yeah, but and around all the urban areas in India, it's fairly congested.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of clear, um, you know, air channels to just fly through where if you are going to go down, you're gonna hit rural farmland versus urbanized area. It's very difficult in especially in Ahmedabad. I think it's the largest city in Gujarat province where this happened. I mean, it's a very, very, very built up urban area, very congested. It's difficult. Um, and typically we don't see, correct me if I'm wrong here, Josh, but we don't typically see issues on the takeoff. It's more on the landing where, you're going to have your typical more, these type of air crashes, right? Um, it not to generalize, but um, that tends to be the concern. So this is, it's definitely tragic either way. And you can imagine the loss of life here. Fuel, even though the fuel, the fuel was cut off, but that means that the fuel is still in the plane, right? So when it ignites and it hits a building, there's even more fuel that's going to spread and cause damage once that impact's made. So, um, you know, damned if you do, damned if you don't. At that point, it's just a tragedy all around, like I mentioned. So, um, but that is kind of where we're at with the investigation at this point. And I
Yeah.
think I think Boeing's going to get, I think they are getting more questions, right? There's a lot of there, and just for those of you guys who aren't in the know, I mean, Boeing has been under scrutiny for the last 2 or 3 years now, if not more, over a lot of different issues, and this is just one more to the heap of issues that have been coming out of Boeing's operations. So. I don't think that they're going to be shown much mercy or grace when they are questioned.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, when you look at this, Boeing may get the grace for all we know, because I think the one thing we have to remember too, it may not be Boeing's fault.
It may not. Yeah, it may not.
uh, anything is possible, especially when you have a complex of an ecosystem and complex of a relationship that you actually have in the aviation industry, because it's not just one group or the other doing it. It is a lot of different people working together. Um, it is mechanics. It is um, sorry, it is mechanics. It is maintenance. It is the airlines. It is the manufacturers. People think Boeing is and Airbus are these people who makes everything, and it's not true. They've evolved to be integrators. They outsource a lot of different pieces of
Yeah,
the manufacturing of their aircraft to various partners across the globe.
Machine shops and integrators, and it's a lot of this is subcontracted out under the umbrella, right?
Yep.
um but nonetheless, I mean, this industry particularly is also highly regulated, right? There is documentation every step of the process. This is one thing about the aviation industry is they are really big about documenting everything, logs, maintenance logs, pilot logs, flight hours. Um, you know, it is probably one of the most highly regulated industries that I've seen,
Yep.
and
Uh,
rightly so. Rightly so.
exactly. And I think the other thing is, look at the flip side of what happened. Like Boeing, they still can't figure out who did the maintenance on the door plug that went out for
Yeah.
the Alaska Airlines because of improper documentation. And
Right.
so they can't trace it down, but they do know certain facts. Like person who normally does that was on vacation, so it's not them. Then who? Well,
Who
we don't.
wasn't? Right.
Exactly. There's questions. So my hope and everything, given the fact that this plane has been flying around for 10 plus years, means something happens, in the recent cycle, like maybe during the maintenance, something may have happened where it may have left the plane in a state where an accident like this could happen. And who knows? It was hot. It was definitely humid. Any number of things that happened. For all we knew, fuel cut off because of another reason.
Yeah. I mean, like you mentioned, we there's a lot we don't know still, and probably more questions than answers at this point.
Yeah. So I think we can safely say that there is going to be um a lot to come for, like, to wait for in the next couple of weeks, if not months. There's gonna be a lot more surprises, and there's gonna be just a lot more to read and discover. And no doubt the investigators are all going to be extremely, I think we're probably be on top of this because there's hundreds of these 787s, about I think almost 1,000 787s flying across the globe in a given point in time. So there's definitely a cause for concern, given that some airlines, they are built around the 787.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I mean, it definitely impacts the industry in more than one way.
Yeah. All right. I'll. What else you got for us this week?
So we did see some acquisitions in the AI space, which is interesting. You know, quite a few acquisitions there, which is, depending on how you look at it, good or bad. You know, um, yeah. So, it's really, I think it's all about perspective on this. But yeah, several acquisitions by, quite frankly, by the big G, Google.
Yeah. So that was an interesting one. Windsurf on the table, in talks to being getting acquired by OpenAI. Um, Talks fell through, and so the net result was that Google picked them up in a very unique fashion. Rather than buying the company, they acquired the talent and licensed the software, which
Yep.
is very interesting on that side of the front.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see where kind of this AI space goes. I think in the next 6 months to a year. Um, I think what I'm seeing, one man's opinion, I think we're starting to see. I mean, we saw earlier in the year and late last year, fairly wide adoption of certain AI platforms. Obviously ChatGPT, um, very very prolific throughout multiple different industries. Um, Claude is out there as well. Gemini is has been launched. Copilot has also been launched, and I think it's being powered by ChatGPT. So AI adoption has really moved ahead quite a bit. But what I also noticed probably about mid this year is we're starting to kind of see some of the feedback loops on AI platforms and systems as there's been wider adoption and people. And when I say people, I mean, individual businesses, tech enthusiasts, futurists, they're starting to see some of the limitations. And I think a lot of this is driven by capacity, compute capacity, which is really directly tied to three key points, right? It's data center availability, bandwidth, capacity, availability. And then we drill that down for this type of commute, or excuse me, not commute, computing that everyone is requiring. And then the third piece of that is um, the money aspect, right? How fast can we build capacity and power to help support more adoption of AI and address different use cases and things like that.
Well,
Um,
I think it's kind of scary how much money is being thrown into this space, and
I
you know,
agree.
it's not just so much that I'm worried about the money, but I'm also worried about the risk management and due diligence in this space.
Yeah,
That,
and I
that's more
think I totally agree with you. I feel like when anytime there's a new pervasive technology out there, there's a tendency, especially in the United States, we throw a lot of money at the problem to try to push the technology as far as we can, at the expense of really mapping out guardrails and controls for that technology. I could point to social media as the test bed, and even prior to that, even when we started seeing wider adoption of e-business, um, people were just not. There was so much pioneering happening. People did not realize the threats out there, or they weren't thinking about how bad actors would leverage the technology to do bad things, right? And so I am 100% in agreement with you that I do believe that we are pushing this technology so hard and so fast that adversaries also have use cases that they want to leverage this technology for, and we are not necessarily um, building out those trust and safety teams and security teams uh, at the same level we're building out the engineering teams and the research teams to push the technology. And I think that's going to bite us.
Did we lose y'all
No, no. Oh, internet connection is unstable.
again? Oh, fun. Um, so let's think. I mean, let's think about this really quickly. Just everything that's just been going on here too. So you know, Google picked up Windsurf for who knows, but probably $3 billion. Um, OpenAI just signed something with Oracle for cloud computing. Sorry, not cloud computing, computing power over the next few years. I think I read one report that um, they signed something so exclusive with Oracle, and Oracle essentially accounts for roughly 25% of the global computing power. Uh,
Yeah,
that was
right.
pretty shocking right there. You had Meta picking up a 49% non-voting, but still 49% minority stake in Scale AI. Amazon picked up Covariant as well. Between that, I think Meta spent close to $15 billion for 49%. Amazon another 500 million. Google spent 2.7 billion on character AI and a reverse acquihire process. Amazon picked up Adept for another 440 million. Microsoft picked up Inflection AI for another 650 million. So, that's a lot of money being thrown around there. And, part of me from a risk management perspective kind of goes, are you really buying technology or are you buying vaporware?
And I think this is going to be one of the big questions that we kind of look at later in the year. We're coming into the back half of the year here, and ultimately, I think conceptually, a lot of these things people look at them and say, "Well, that's really cool, right?" But there was an old saying in Silicon Valley. Um, you know, that's the coolest idea ever. But if it costs one penny, would you still want it? Right. And I think that that's the case here with a lot of these companies and platforms. It's when it's free, everyone's okay with it. But the minute it costs money, is it really that useful? Is it really something that I'm going to pay money for to use on a day-to-day basis to solve an actual business problem? Um, and I think it is to be seen who survives that scrutiny, right?
Yeah. I keep thinking about the time, when blockchain was the big thing and someone came out with a blockchain toaster. And I just kept thinking about,
Yeah.
I forgot how much
Well,
of
I mean, you
this
remember, I mean, what was
toaster.
it, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Metaverse was huge. People were buying, metaverse real estate and spending actual physical lots of money for metaverse real estate.
Yeah.
Uh, and
Feels like a very bad episode of Upload. Oops. Al, did we lose you again?
a lot of these AI platforms. Oh, did I go away again?
Yes, you did.
Sounds like my computer's got COVID too.
Battery internet has COVID.
Yeah, the internet's got COVID. But like I said, I think it is to be seen where some of this goes, and but I think there's broader implications to the tech industry in general, right? We've already seen almost 3 years of layoffs, and now we're seeing instead of those positions being backfilled, AI is taking the place of, or at least AI, they're attempting to get AI to take the place of some of these other positions that should be backfilled, right? Or that were supposed to be backfilled. Um, these companies are paying big sums of money for these AI platforms. Then there's the compute investment of running the data centers and the energy costs and all that. Um, you know, it, if when the vaporware is exposed and that investment's lost, there's wider implications to those businesses and the workforce, right? Now we're looking at more layoffs potentially, right? So it is an AI race. Everybody is trying to be the, I should call it AI arms race, right? Everyone is trying to have the best platform, most effective platform to attract the customer base. But um, ultimately, I think the consumer base really looks at this and says, "Is this worth the penny?" Right? If it's not worth the penny, then I don't, we're not going to do it.
Yeah, and it's just fun to see the evolution. So I'm mindful, like I think what a friend of mine told me, Hal, told me the other day in a lecture, like he's lived through three different AI revolutions.
Yeah, yeah.
And just it makes you kind of pause. Okay, so what's so special about this third time around? Is it third time's a charm, or is it third time's a bust? So,
Yeah,
there's a
right.
lot of questions, whether with direction of, this so-called AI, what makes this one unique and special
What
in
makes this one
context.
different, right? What makes this one better? What makes this one different? I think if you spend any time in Silicon Valley, you've seen the ebbs and flows of new technology come in and out. My concern is, there are a lot of impacts here to the workforce, right? I mean, you scale up. Typically, what we see is there's a scale up, a lot of hiring to manage the projects and staff the projects that come about these big acquisitions, but there's no monetization. And then all of a sudden the plug gets pulled overnight, right? And now, several hundred, potentially several thousand people are out of jobs. Um, you've got to do either a mass layoff or you've got to start, you know, doing rotating layoffs, stress to the workforce, stress on the security teams, both cyber and physical, that have to manage that. So I think it's something to be prepared for, as we start seeing, the quarterly earnings and wait, how long are they going to keep these things on life support? How long is Meta, the Googles, the Microsofts of the world going to keep dumping money into these things? What's the ROI? What's the return on investment? Um, you know, so it's something I think something everyone we've got to be cautious and 5 years ago when money was flowing pretty regularly, I may not have been as concerned, but we're in a very different capital market right now. We're in a very different financial market right now. Um, you know, it's not the same. It's not the same right now. it's
Yep, exactly. All right. What else we got next? Besides the AI conversation. I remember, was it
critical. Yeah, we had critical infrastructure and some policies that just went out.
yeah. And then we also had Ingram Micro, the world's biggest distributor, getting hacked, 7 days
Yep.
ago. They are finally back up and operational. Um,
It's important to note, like 7 days out of operations, that is a lifetime in 2025. I mean, a week.
well, I think they got lucky because it happened like on the 3rd of July,
Yeah,
3rd,
it
4th of
happened right
July.
before a holiday. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
So, at least 3 of those days, granted, they probably paid 2 times overtime for the recovery. And some people missed their fireworks and, 4th of July with their families. But, that isn't bad in the grand scheme of things. About what, a week's downtime is not bad at all.
well, but imagine if it happened during Black Friday, right? Like
But
that week. That would have been catastrophic. That would have been catastrophic. I think personally.
it did happen during Prime Day, though.
It did. It did. So speaking of which, we did see Walmart come out with the Walmart week during the same Prime week. So that was interesting to see Walmart challenging Amazon's dominance.
They've been doing it for some time, though. That
They
was
have, but I've never seen it advertised in such a manner. They're really going head to head now. So
Yeah, except they're not the one who's setting the cadence. It's Amazon. So
it's Amazon setting the pace here. So it pays to be number one. Pays to be a winner, as we used to say, right? It pays to be a winner. So you get to set the pace for the race, right? So
yeah, exactly.
um,
But let's talk about that public policy that also came out too, because that was just interesting. It just got released just right before the podcast, and to everyone who's watching this, Al and I have not read the entire thing in depth. It literally came out like an hour or two before we went live here. But we've read a couple summaries, but by all means, the summaries are incomplete. There's a lot of policy that goes in the back of things and everything. But I think the recent executive order, they wanted to double down on using robust security frameworks, continuous monitoring, and adaptive compliance strategies. And they're trying to tout it more along the lines of policy as kind of like software code methodology, which kind of interesting. Okay. What do you think about this, Al? Because I'm thinking about this, and I kind of feel like I'm a little doubtful. Maybe is my problem here, and the only reason I'm a little doubtful is because um, it still feels like an unfunded mandate. That's my problem with it.
yeah, and it might be. I think when we look at the administration in a whole, I think a lot of um, a lot of the policies are really directed at stopping state actors from doing things, right? And unfortunately, I think the federal government right now is still trying to figure out how it's going to fund a lot of different things. I think that there's been a lot of shakeups with the Doge stuff coming in, um, and just a lot of uncertainty on a lot of different things, right? And so, but I think it's important. I think for the administration, I think it's important for them to have the rhetoric and put the policies out. I think that's when we kind of look at the patterns of what the administration has done in the past on other policies, right? There's always been a policy put in place or a direction. This is kind of where we want to go. This is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to aim for. And then shortly thereafter, there's multiple different other things that come out, right, to support that bigger, broader vision. I think that might be what's going on here. Obviously, I can't speak for the administration or any of that, but I think if we just look at the pattern analysis, I think that might be what this is.
Yeah, I'm just concerned because um basically if I read this, read the summaries correctly, what they're saying is that any company that sells software, cloud services, or any connected device to the public sector will also need to provide evidence that its security controls are written, and it's also enforced through machine readable rules. So that means like, wow, like, are we trying, like, what does that entail? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to accomplish? I mean, does this mean that am I transmitting,
I,
does this mean I'm transmitting stuff
I
to,
look at it as
go
no,
ahead.
no, go ahead, go ahead,
Well,
finish your thought.
well, my thought was more along the lines of like, am I sending real time telemetry or data back to the government? And but as all code, depending on how you write it, could just be read only, but it also could be read write. So does it mean that they could theoretically start pushing certain rules or things back down? Now it's because it's code, and I keep thinking of like who watches the freaking Watchers at this point. I mean,
Well,
there's just
yeah,
so
and
many
and
questions.
I think that becomes a concern, right? It's like, with and not just with the policy, but with anytime the government gets involved in um something like this, where essentially they want to review the data, they want to see what's going on, they want to have the ability to review massive amounts of data, in this case code. um the question always becomes, well, what are you going to do with this, right? What are you, and then how secure is it going to be? The government has shown time and time again that when they tell us, don't worry, it's secure, it's safe, it's not. It's WikiLeaks, it's an OPM leak, it's multiple hackings of multiple different agencies. So I don't, again, I don't know if maybe this policy is in place so they can quickly identify where there may be gaps and potential areas of concern from a overall cyber posture. Maybe that's what it is. But to your point, I mean, who's watching the Watchers at this point, right? Um, and what do you do if you disagree with an assessment that they make, right? We've seen this time and time again where the government makes an assessment, private industry or private citizens have come to a different conclusion with the same data. How do you challenge that? How do you challenge that assessment now, right? Um, so I think these are all things that are going to come out. And this is an EO, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's an executive order, if I'm not mistaken. So
It
uh,
is.
it could be rescinded, when a new administration comes in or not. But it is it is an interesting it is an interesting executive order, especially at this time, especially when we've heard the rumblings about Palantir coming in and creating databases on U.S. citizens and all this other stuff. This kind of fits into that. Like, wait, is what's going on here? Is this, is there a play there? Right? Is Palantir? Are they looking to leverage Palantir to start doing big audits? Right?
Yeah, I just keep having this scene from Matilda running through my mind right now. It goes, um, listen, you wiseacre. I'm smart, you're dumb. I'm big, you're little. I'm right, you're wrong, and there's nothing you can do about it. I'm having this picture just with the US government just saying that to us right now. And like, okay.
So I mean, I'm reading the article right now. I mean, this is what was cited as the reasons for the policy, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. This is not me, everyone. Don't get mad at me. I'm just reading the article. So if you disagree, drop a comment in there and let everyone know you disagree. But um, release velocity has accelerated, and therefore manual assessment packages cannot keep pace. Architectural complexity has grown. Hybrid clouds, containers, edge devices, SaaS platforms create connections too dense for spreadsheet mapping. Regulatory concurrency has intensified. Programs must show conformance with FISMA, FedRAMP, CMMC, the Secure Software Development Framework, multiple state privacy laws, and sector-specific rules at the same time. Policy as a code resolves these gaps because rules run continuously, update quickly, and leave a clear evidence trail. So that is what the article from Cyberscoop cites as the reasons behind the executive order. Again, a lot of times we see like good initiative, bad judgment. It was maybe put out under the best intentions. However, operationally, it may not actually go the way we want it to go. Yet to be seen. But again, I'm reading the article here. Some of the benefits listed here are risk reduction, audit efficiency, operational efficiency, regulatory agility, enhanced security posture, cost savings, and greater resilience. Now, I read that, I read all those points, and I say, for an administration that ran on government efficiency, cost savings, reducing the waste, draining the swamp, whatever you want to call it, whatever the cool term, in line with what. Am I unstable again? No, I'm going. Okay, cool. Those seem like talking points that are in line with what the messaging from the administration has been for quite some time. So it doesn't surprise me. But again, I think time will tell how this is applied and implemented, right? We did see and the example I'll give you is the 9/11 Commission came out with several recommendations post 9/11 to get Intel community partners to work together so we wouldn't have things fall through the cracks between agencies, between interagency cooperation, right? And it took almost 12 years for even 20% of those to be implemented. So I think I look at this and say maybe a good idea. However, how fast does this actually roll out? What is the realistic timeline here? I don't see this being something that can. It's not a switch. I don't see this being a switch that gets turned on tomorrow.
I think the thing that, holds me in thought of, what the possibilities are, is that at the end of the day, how do you fund an initiative like this? I mean, this is a pretty mature initiative if you think about it at the end of the day. So if it's such a really mature initiative and people can't do the basics with the resources they got, how do you expect them to do something more advanced with the same resources? It just becomes, essentially a giant unfunded mandate. That's what I'm worried about here. And don't get me
Yeah,
wrong, I'm 150, if not 200% behind any initiative that helps reduce risk in a meaningful way. But you got to be able to support that. You got to have the resources behind it. You have to be able to enable people to do it. Otherwise, what are you going to do? It's like you can't do anything.
correct. Yeah, yeah. I mean, and this is the thing. Executive orders are only as good as the ability to actually support those, right? And we've seen this time and time again with multiple administrations where executive orders go out, but there's no real teeth behind them, right? They're put out, they're there, they're guidance, but realistically, whatever agency is responsible to support that order doesn't really have the ability to do it. But so again, this comes, is this political theater? It might be. It might be. It very well might be. Is it maybe something with legs that will be funded and we'll have money routed from somewhere else? I doubt that they would raise taxes to try to fund this, given some of the rhetoric from the administration. But then again, I don't know, right? Big Beautiful Bill did add a lot of debt potentially to the country. So maybe this is part of the Big Beautiful Bill that, we haven't seen it. I don't know, right?
I don't know how beautiful that bill is right now because look at it, it's looking more like a bad, bad, bad bill.
My quote for this entire podcast will be time will tell, right? Time will tell us if it was beautiful or if it was bad.
Just
So,
keep in mind, remember the bill is staggered operationally to activate. So it doesn't activate immediately. It
right.
activates,
It it
in
it,
phases
it
and
goes in phases. Correct. Correct.
specifically on election years too. So just saying.
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. It's staggered. So we'll see what happens. I think, yeah, conceptually, like in my opinion, you know, if this thing does get legs and we're able to optimize and streamline IT services across the federal government, I don't think that's a bad thing. Um, However, there's a cultural aspect here too that every agency has its own culture in the United States government. And several administrations have tried to kind of knock the walls down and get people on the same operating platform. And it's very difficult. It's just very difficult culturally in the federal government to do that. Everybody believes they have their own little niche, own specific requirements, and in a lot of cases they do. And that requires them to have special software packages which may not fall in this purview. And then when we go down that rabbit hole, when we go down that route with one agency, then the other agency wants to do it. And then before you know it, you don't like you have exceptions, you have multiple exceptions, and even though you have the executive order, even though you have funding behind it, it's completely irrelevant because you have so many exceptions to policy that you're right back to where you were before. So, and that is, ladies and gentlemen, that is how our government works right there. That's it.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
That's right. What could possibly go wrong? So, but yeah, I think time will tell where the administration how they actually enforce this and how they actually push this forward. Um,
Well,
who
more to
knows?
the point, like how are you going to get all the vendors to support it too? Because that's going to be
Well,
the
and that's another piece of this, right? I mean, vendors typically, when a big regulatory compliance, you know, I guess, uh, comes out, vendors do ask for, like, well, hey, that's unrealistic. Like, and I'll give you an example. I was at a large social media company. You guys know which one I'm talking about, probably. And the CCPA came out, and it was like, we need you to be in compliance with the new California privacy laws, and this is what we want you to do. And it was very clear to us at that point that we're going to have to request um, 2 to 3 years of exceptions because there's no way we can turn the operation around that quickly to be in compliance, right? So every vendor then has the ability, depending on their footprint within the U.S. government, to request an appeal and an extension or compliance extension. So, um, like I said, our government, for all its faults, all of its benefits, it it hasn't shown a tendency of moving fast, whether it's the government itself, the vendors, or the contractors. Nobody really moves fast. So it's just something that, it's just a reality.
yeah, or just a lot of perfection getting in the way of progress.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
All right. I think we're hitting almost top of the hour here.
Yep, looks like it. Looks like
Yep.
it.
So, closing thoughts. What do you got for this week?
Yeah, I would say, you know, obviously, I think, one, I hope everyone's enjoying their summer. I hope everyone's decompressing and getting some vacation time in. I hope you don't get COVID. That's thought number two, because I just had it again and I didn't like it. Wasn't, 10 out of 10, do not recommend. Um, uh, and then I think the last thing is I think we're in a period right now where there's a lot of change occurring. Whether it's AI, whether it's executive orders, whether it's just a geopolitical situation I don't think we've seen in a very long time. And so I would tell everyone, really, 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 between your time of decompressing and enjoying your summer, get ready for probably a Q3 and a Q4 full of change as well. I mean, there's just a lot of change coming. We're in one of those weird transition periods. People call it the fourth industrial revolution or fifth industrial revolution, whatever you want to call it. You are living through history right now. So I would say for all the teams out there, everyone watching, get ready for big changes. Get ready for the hold on to the roller coaster. Things are changing, and there's no signs of them slowing down.
I think you couldn't have said it better in any way. If anything that's constant here, it's that things are moving faster and faster. And geez, it's getting harder to keep pace. Feels like at times I'm holding barely on to all the changes in technology, by my fingertips.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's crazy. Even if we just look at ISC West last year to this year, the just the proliferation of different technologies where a year ago one or two vendors were in that space, and then this year 15, 20 in the you're like, what's going on here?
Yeah. All right, folks. Just a reminder, this week is the Security Journal Americas conference. So I will
Chicago.
be resting comfortably in San Diego and I will
Yeah.
be in Chicago. So do come by and say hi. And then, of course, it is the legendary Hacker Summer Camps. So, Al, you going, by the way?
I'm gonna try to make an appearance. So
Hey, don't forget, it's Cabana Mondays, too.
right. And then and
And
then August 6th, I'll be down in Dallas, the Dallas area for a data center conference, speaking on a panel there. So if you're in the Dallas area, I'll be at the Fairmont Dallas. Stop by, say hi. Would love to chat with you.
yeah. All right, folks. So that's it for this week's episode. We'll be back next week as
Probably
usual.
next week. Yeah, next week.
Then We'll
Sounds
be
great.
shaking things up as usual.
Yeah,
And until then, wishing you some very interesting weeks ahead.
that's right. What could possibly go wrong, right? What
Yeah.
could possibly go wrong?
All right. Take care, folks. We'll see you
All right,
soon.
guys.